Yes, sir. Op the record.
Okay.
I have no idea what he did.
Weiter.
You can expect us to call him again. Don't worry about
What's your home phone number?
I don't know.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
Good.
Davar.
ספר קצת מפוי.
You can't.
Put it up on a...
It's for Dre. It's vermished.
Okay.
Okay, leave it.
If you had a book, a telephone book, you could raise it up.
It says, Shkoya, I brought him to
Shkaya Isha.
That's Imke in Shabbos Bereshis. It's like what the Rebbe calls Bakoyach. Everything is there, but it's all potential. The world was given to man, that man should serve Hashem and turn the world into a Dirali B'Taktin. So that hasn't yet occurred. The world is created in its perfection and everything, and it's waiting for man to come and deal with it the way Hashem wants. And so Noah deals with that in a very special and very vivid sort of way, because man starts off and then unfortunately he doesn't do so good and things become very bad. And Hashem takes away the world and then brings it back, and then man creates a brit, a covenant with Hashem that he will never destroy the world again. And that's based on the what you might call the readiness of man to devote himself by Mesiras Nefesh to the will of Hashem. And that's hinted at in the Korban that Noah offered up after the going out of the Teva. So from that we see that the world goes through a whole process of man's not getting it right, then a complete breakage in the existence of the world, then man making it right once again, and beginning his service of Hashem in a right and balanced way. And that's the message of Noah. And so therefore the Rebbe says that it follows Rafi said that these two Shabbosos are very general Shabbosos. But one is general because it's the state of potentiality. And the other is general because it's already what we call the opposite of koyach, which is poyel. Poyel means when things actually get moving from the potentiality into the reality. So Shabbos Noach is the movement into reality of the potentiality of the whole creation. And that's I'm just summing up so it makes the first paragraph easier to understand. B'siyumay shel chodesh Tishrei, at the completion of the whole chodesh of Tishrei, shehu chodesh harishon shel Hashana, which is in effect the first month in the year, v'asher berubay kakulei, what according to and what we know that in its majority, and that's more or less the whole of it, hu koilel chagim u'moyadim. Like the Medrash brings, that Tishrei is what we call Merubah Moyadim. It's very blessed and multiplied with Yom Tov. So the majority of Tishrei were busy in a state of being Yom Tov Dik, as we might use the expression. Is Bo Shabbos Bereshis. At the siyum of that whole Eden comes Shabbos Bereshis, Uleachreya Shabbos Parsha Noach. But after that comes Parsha Noach. Al Shabbos Bereshis Yodua HaPizgam or Ima, well that's a Pizgam from the Rebbe that some tzaddik it's not known to have began, that the way you stand yourself on Shabbos Bereshis, that's the way it will be the whole year. So he said, "On Hogesh of Shabbos Bereshis nimsheches al pnei kol hashana." But it's not just that it's nimsheches; it's also that it affects. That the way you stand on Shabbos Bereshis, that's the way you're going to affect and shape the whole of your Avodas Hashem during the whole year. Atam Kachu, and the reason for that is Kivan She'oz Mistayemes Ha'avoda Ha'nailish Shel Chodesh Tishrei. At that particular point, there is completing and reaching its end the whole Avoda, very elevated Avoda of Chodesh Tishrei. U'matchila Avodas Hashem Hayom Yomiyas Shel Kol Yemei Shoshana. And after that, there begins the Avodas Hashem. Our Yid is demanded, and he has to face the challenge of serving Hashem in the day-to-day situation. And he called the hoo-ha, or what you might even, to use a slang expression, the rat, the rat race, even one, maybe in America they might call it. They said, Matchila Avodas Hashem Hayom Yomiyas Shel Kol Yemei Shoshana. So we see that Shabbos Bereishis is a very tremendously important, like we learned last week, passing point from these two stages. So he said, Avoda v'teich ha'olam agashmi. And the main avoda which is demanded after Shabbos Bereishis is the avoda in this world, not being separate from the world, but dafki in the world with all of its trials and all of its hakbolas. That's where you're demanded to make the avoda. Yeah, and he writes in brackets, V'shoina, differently from the Tkufas Chodesh Tishrei, Sha'oz Avodas Hashem Hiba Tenua Shal Yisreimanas Migidre Ha'olam. He said you have to serve Hashem differently than you do during the period of Tishrei, because then during Tishrei you're in a state of serving Hashem with a movement and with an activity in the soul of self-elevation and separation from the Gidrei Ha'olam. And not just separation stam, but in a way of elevation and raising up. But you're separate from the world. So the Rebbe says that since we have the cloud brought down in the Zohar and Pasha Yisrael, that it's well known that from the day of Shabbos, all the days of the week gain their bracha, and they are blessed by the Shabbos. The Shabbos causes a bracha in all the days of the week, not just in the days of the week which are shayah, particularly al pi pnimis to Shabbos, but all the days of the week gain a bracha from Shabbos. Then harei shemishabbos zu mizbochim yemei hashavua harishon la'aveda bo ilom. He said, from this Shabbos we're dealing with now, the Shabbos of Noyah, which is different even than Bereishis. He said, because from this Shabbos, in other words, the Shabbos we're facing now, Mizbochim Yomei HaShavua Harishon La'aveda Bo'olam. The Indian for Shabbos Bereishis is not yet mamish the Aveda Bo'olam. It's like a go-between between the high state of Tishrei and movement into the Elam, but it's still within Tishrei, and it's still, as it were, part of the whole pattern of the Aveda of Tishrei. However, Shabbos Noyach is when you enter the world and you have to make a go of it in the world the way it is. Shahem, what the Aveda, Yebatoik Gidrei Ha'olam, Shahem Koilalim, Eshemei HaShavua, Shalko Hemshech HaShana. Well, these days of Shabbos Pasha Noyach, being as it is the first week of what Hashem wants of us, to make eventually a dira in the world and in the limitations of the world. And we enter the world and we work in the world, what that's the union of Noyah. He said those days are koilo, all the days of the week, of the whole continuation of the whole year. Now the Rebbe says a very fascinating thing, that this week, which is the week of Pasha Noyah, each day is a day kloli, and it's koil in itself all the days of the coming year, of all the weeks. And he says, how can we say that? How does that work? So he says that if we look at the way Yidden count time, then we see that we count the time by weeks. And you go up to the seventh day, And then Sunday is not the 8th day, but Sunday goes back to be the first day. The way the time works is in cycles that go back to where they started. And then those weeks add up to a certain amount of time. But you don't have, if you counted how many days there are since Bereshit Bara, then it would be millions of days since then. Yeah? But we don't do it that way. We go to the 7th day and then we start all over again. So the Rebbe said, Kuntais, that the measuring of time is like in a cycle period of 7 days. So he said, Kuntais, when you have 7 days, Parshanoia, what their whole aim is to make the first step into what Hashem sees to be the ultimate purpose of the whole creation. In other words, you enter the world and you have to do in the world and make the world into a holy place. And since that's the first 7 days where that actually occurs, then that affects all the 7 days, period, of the whole year. Since that's the ultimate purpose of what Hashem wants. And that's the ultimate tachlis of why you were created. They're like general days, and all the week cycles of the whole year are like inside those 7 day cycle, that 7 day cycle. It's an amazing thing. And it would appear, if you look inside, it would appear that the Rebbe is saying that it's even more than Shabbos Bereshit. It's got a certain mile in the sense that since we're doing what is actually our task, we've come down from the Yom Tov Tika period into the world Kipshutim. It's an amazing thing. And he's got a few footnotes to Rebbe where he proves his case that 1 week can be koilel in itself all the weeks of the year. Yeah, very amazing idea. Hare, shemishavas zu mizbochim yemei hashavua harishain laveda ba'olam. Yeah, but that's the word, the Aveda Shabbos Pasha of the week of Noach. Shehin koilim es yemei hashavua shekol hemshech hashana. They have in themselves, and they koilel all the weeks that are going to be for the mission of the whole year. Mishum sheshivas yemei hashavua shel kol hashana heim oisim shiva yemei yomim hachorizim v'nishnim kol shavua. That we see that every week, it's the same 7 days come back. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4, then they come back 1, 2, 3. It's all the same pattern. So the Rebbe says that since this is the general kavanah of what Hashem wants of man in the creation, then it affects and has in itself, and it affects all the weeks of the year, because they're all the same pattern. They all just repeat time and time again the same basic pattern. It's a very amazing idea when you think of it. And that idea has brought a lot into us that every week goes back again to where the previous week started. That's brought a lot into us. But a view of it like this that the Rebbe puts here is very, it's like all things that the Rebbe doesn't say something that never existed before, but he brings down in Yonim which are known, and he throws a whole new spectrum onto. Behetem lazois, appropriate to that basic fact, Harei Shabbos Parshanoia, Shebesiyum HaShavua Harishon LaAveda Ba'olam, the actual Shabbos of Parshanoia itself, which is the completion of that first week of serving Hashem in the world, Mamish, Mahave es HaShabbos HaRishoina HaMisameches Es Tchilas HaAveda Ba'olam. He said that that's the first Shabbos, which, as it were, sums up and completes and brings to its conclusion the first week of our Avodah Mamish in the world. He said, "B'Shabbos Bereshis niklelas ha'avodah shel kol yemei hashavua koidem lebitzua l'maisa." He said, Shabbos Bereshis had a great milah, but it's the way in which all the Avodah is kolul without coming into Maisa. Because Hashem just presented the creation in its entirety and presented it before man. Or the ego, what man gets into the world and deals with the world is an alpha. So he said, therefore, Shabbos Bereshis, since it's koidim l'bitzua l'maisa, it's called potential. Bakoyach is an expression in Siddur meaning a state of potentiality. ואילו Shabbos Noach היא המסכמת את תחילת העבודה למעשה, and therefore it's called Poyam. It's called the idea of the further development of potential, which is Maisa, deed. And therefore the Rebbe said, Bereshit, it's got a wondrous Mila, but it's all in the form still of what's waiting to be brought to its completion. It's a state of potentiality. Parsha Noach is the Inyan of Poyam. Behetem Lakach, says the Rebbe, Matim Shamasha Parsha Noach. He said, Shema Shel Parsha Noach. He said, according to that, it will make very good sense why the name, why Noach is called Noach. The whole Parsha is called Noach. He said, L'toikna Shel Shabbazu. It will fit very nicely the concept of this Shabbos, Shekein Ka'omur, Ashavua Harishin La'avoida B'toich Ha'olam, Mahava Hachona, V'koilo B'toich Eshemoiz Ha'shavua Shel Kol HaShona, ומכאן שבשבס פרשה נויה מודגש בעיקר כלל עניינה Shabbos. Since we said that Noach is like the completion, Shabbos Parsha Noach is like the completion of the first week of work in the world, and it affecting all the weeks of the world to come, of the year to come. So it's like the Shabbos, affecting all the Shabbos of the weeks to come of the whole year. Then the concept of Shabbat, and the Rebbe said, if we look at the basic concept, that if you ask a Yid what is the whole Inyan of Shabbos, he will tell you it's a day of rest. It's the Inyan of Menucha. And the whole Inyan is that we're demanded to do everything on Shabbos, we take the pleasure of Menucha. That's what Shabbos represents. If they're high in Yonim and Avodas Hashem, well, they come with the Menucha. Because a mensch is in a state of Menucha, he's able to reach deeper and more spiritual things on Shabbat. So therefore the Rebbe said, the word Noach is from the basic word of Manu. The basic root of the word Menucha is hidden in the word Noach. So therefore, because Noach is such a holistic Shabbat regarding all the Shabbos of the whole year, and therefore it's called Noach. So the Rebbe says, yes, Shabon Mudgash Ha'ika Klolos Inyan HaShabbat. V'omno Zehu Teichan Hashem Noach. Yeah, that's in effect and in truth, that is the Teichan, the inner concept of the word Noach, Menucha. Yes, Shehi Mahuso Ha'ikaris Shalosh Shabbos. That is the essential mahuz, that it calls, the essential makeup of what Shabbos is all about. And like the Targum brings down in Pasha Bereshit, by Yom HaShvihi, we call Malate Asher Asor, or Targum, that's the Targum Onkelos, V'noch B'Yom HaShvi, or that the Eibishter rested on the, he translates the Inyan Vayishbois, which is the Lashon Shabbos, he translates it V'noch. So we see that the etzem word Vayishbois in Targum Lashon is Noch. In other words, the etzem concept of Menucha is in the word Noch. And so therefore Noach is from the same root word, it's the Inyan of Noch. And therefore we see in the Midrash that it brings down that the two usages of Noach at the beginning, Eila told us Noach is Noichel el Yonim and Noichel el Toinim, that it's in of rest and what you might call coming to a state of fulfillment and rest, both in the higher worlds and in the lower world. So we see that the Shabbos Noach is the etzem concept, kloli v'atzmi, of Shabbos be'etzem, because it's like the resting after the first week of the emes struggle, and therefore it becomes like a Shabbos for all the Shabbos of the whole year. They also gain their ability to be Noch and Menucha from Parsha Noach. Yes, a kesher v'ha'evdel bein toichan Shabbos Bereshit l'Parsha Noach b'koyho b'poyo anu maichim gam b'toichan ha'parshiyah. The Rebbe said if we look at the inner story which is told in both parshas, we can see this difference that we just made. So he said, how do we see it? But Parsha Bereshis, Mesupo Edis Brias Oil. We're told the story of the creation. Of Parsha Noach, Avtocha Al Kiyum Oil. We see one of the central themes in Noach is the divine promise to preserve the world, Bo'even Nitzchi. Yeah, but that promise, which is to keep the world for everlasting, is Baal Yachrei Mabul. It comes after a tremendous challenge to its own existence, which was the Mabul. And then the divine promise is that Oid meaning, forever will go on with the Seder, Kol Yemei HaOretz, all the, like Kayats, Choyra, V'chom, Lo Yish Boiser. They will never again reach a state of negativity or negation. They will always be there. So we see that Noach has in itself a promise al kiyum nitzchi of the Elam. Bereshis only tells us how the Elam come about. Over here, there's an additional divine undertaking to the, what you might call the nitzchias of the world. So the Rebbe said, Parsha Bereshis, Meduba of Shleimus Kiyum Oilam, Kafishu Behetem L'Kavona Al-Yoyna. So he said that if we examine carefully, Bereshis, definitely, since it's the creation of the world, it definitely had in itself Hashem's purpose, and it was for sure in Hashem's purpose that it should be, kiyum, should be kiyum oilam, a preserved world, according to the divine purpose and the divine aim in creating the world. It's not a perfection that came in the world mitzad its own self. That means to say, Makbil Avedis Hashem, B'toy Gidrei Ha'olam. It's not yet that would Aveda, the Shleimus Mitzad Atzmai, would be a parallel of the world being made perfect through the Avedis Hashem of the man. Ella, it's a Shleimus Kafishi Mitzad Briosei Shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu. What that is Makbil, that is parallel, Avedis Hashem Hanailish, that has in itself a similarity to the way things are in Chodesh Tishrei. She'ein la shayches, it doesn't yet have connection with the actual limitations of the world and the trials of serving Hashem in the limitations of the world.
Yeah.
So he said, therefore, it's a perfection which is a elevated perfection in a state of potentiality. Like we said, it's mitzad Hashem bilvad. Only mitzad Hashem. Davke kasher ha'olam misnahil al pi madrigose harutzuya v'amatima v'rutzeini shel HaKodesh. Davke when the world will conduct itself according to the desired madriga and appropriate madriga that is appropriate to Hashem's will, as hayesh laschuskim, then it's going to have the right and the, as it were, the merit to be everlasting. And so that's going to be expressed, Davke in Noach. In other words, why doesn't he promise the Schutz Kiyum in Bereshis? Because it hasn't yet started what is the ultimate kavanah, that it's all mitzad the men and mitzad the world. And therefore he didn't promise the whole in Schutz Kiyum in Bereshis. He said, B'shah shehu yoyrid me'madregazu. At the moment that, God forbid, it goes down from that madrega, shuv ain't like schus kiyum, or if it will go down from that, then Hashem doesn't promise that it's going to have kiyum nitzchi. Only if it will be matim to the way he wanted it, then it can keep going. And he said, no, and that's the truth. The Parsha Noach metuva al shleimus ha'olam mitzad gidrei. He said that the shleimus that the world gains in Parsha Noach is from the world itself, not mitzad Hashem, but mitzad the world itself. Hayichoilas litalot b'chazora gam mimatzav bilti ratzui lechalutim. The ability and the power to reinstate himself. Man shows that he can come back and reinstate himself, and together with himself the world, after a situation that was absolutely unwanted and improper, absolutely. And so that's sort of what the Rebbe just said. Since everything was either the way it had been created according to the way Hashem wanted it, and it wasn't the way Hashem wanted it, so it didn't have any right to exist. So it didn't have any right to exist, it didn't. That was the marvel. So what happened is that man took such a situation and he brings about a situation where Hashem promises him that the world will continue to exist and it will never undergo that type of Yerida again. Is a sign that in Parsha Noach there's a tremendous essential change where man not only appears in the world, but he makes a huge mess of it, and then he comes back and puts everything right to the point where Hashem promises him that there will never be that again.
That was the building of the ark that did all that? Because nothing else happens in Noach special about what man did except for the building of the ark. What did they do other than the ark? That's the building of the ark? That's it?
It's written that the whole world, there's a lot of Pesukim which tell us that the world went completely down.
Right.
And because it went completely down, Hashem said that it doesn't have any right to exist. And he took it away. That was even at the end of Parsha Bereshit. So Hashem took it away. How did man preserve the whole world? Through Noah. And Noah built the ark and he kept everybody going. But when he got out, he made sure that there was a preservation of the world in such a way that Hashem would promise him that he would never destroy it again. It's a sign that there's been some essential change. Because the way the world was made by Hashem, if it's the way he made it, then fine. If not, it doesn't exist. Man has brought about a situation where Hashem promises him unconditionally that it's going to be everlasting. You follow? Which means that man must have done through his avodah, through Noach and the ark and the whole thing, he must have done something which just changed the whole way that Hashem looks at these guys.
Korbanos. The Korbanos also did. The Korbanos.
That's a prat in the bio, or even slowly, that's it. יכול להיות לסעד ובכל גם ממצב בלתי רוצה לחפשים, וזו איש על ידי אביידס התשובה. Oh, here we see the Rebbe talks about tshuva. It's very interesting. In these things he doesn't mention it very often, but he said that Noach represents the close union of tshuva. There's a lot of different biurim in Siddur. Benegel is there. Exactly what was Noach's soul change, and what change did he cause, and what change did he bring about after the whole union? That when they came out of the Teva, and Rav Marzon mentions the union of the Korbanos, that's also right. But there's several factors in the union. The Rebbe says that like the central inner message of the whole thing is the union of children, but they did children. So he said, Adarabah, Davki metake matzav ha'olam k'shela atzmei, that Davki from the situation of the world, the way it is in its own right, k'fi shu b'matzav yor b'yesa mipchina ruknis, and a feeling as a matzav where it's in the most, how do you call it, down state, how do you call it, cast down or descending state, mipchina ruknis, from the state of ruknis, it's gone down completely, and it reaches a level of taktoim she'ein, taktoim lamata heimenu, that you can't have lower than that. It's gone right down to the state of Hashem saying that mitzid him, it has no right to exist anymore. Na'aseh matzav chodosh shel bira v'zichur. Well, in other words, that Chassidus teaches that what happened with Noach was through his avodah and the avodah of those with him, they brought about a world chadash. In other words, that it was like not the same, and therefore this just involves another very interesting concept, and that is that most Meforshim learn that the mabul was what do you call it, a punishment. It was like a wiping out, and the main aim of the mabul was to wipe people out. To destroy the world. The Alter Rebbe writes in this week's Torah that the main purpose of the mabul was tahara. It was like a mikveh. That's a whole different view and a whole different concept of what was the whole inner of the mabul. So according to the Alter Rebbe and all the Rebbeim after, The whole purpose of the Mabul was to purify the world so that it becomes like a different world, a filu in a sense of maker. And I'll give you a dogma, everybody asked the kasha that Hashem made the kesher. Hashem made the kesher as the sign of the kiyum mo'il. So everybody said, but the kesher is a natural thing. Yeah, why should it be considered, like a divine thing? It's a natural thing, it happens anyway. So